Well, you know what? I know since the pandemic, it's really been like a test and learn environment. I know that some of you are trying things that were never even on your radar, or others maybe, things that you've been sort of testing the waters. It really accelerated because of COVID. And that's certainly what happened with Cadillac as they began to increasingly scale addressable TV with their local dealers. And as you can see, Eric Neville, he is here. I want to introduce him. And he's the Senior Manager of Media and Audience Strategy at Cadillac. Hey, Eric.
Hey, how you doing?
Yep. How are you?
Good, good. Excited to be here. Excited to be wearing a shirt with buttons as well. So thanks for having me.
We make you get dressed up, huh?
Yeah, right.
Well, maybe I shouldn't get there, but anything underneath is probably shorts or whatever. So, but we're glad to have you. And this is really great. I've been trying to get you to talk about this because this is really interesting, I think. And actually yesterday, your CMO, Melissa, she did a great presentation and I really enjoyed it. But she touched on a little bit about what we're going to be diving more deeply into in terms of the success that you guys are having with the audience modeling and targeting. And we're going to get into that more and addressable TV, obviously. But before we even get started there, talk to me a little bit about what you were discovering from your marketing mix before this.
Yeah, for sure. So what's interesting is Adam from Samsung and Christina from Roku and I think Dan from Dish. I think I'm going to echo a lot of what they've been saying. So hopefully it's a good way to wrap it up. I actually met with Dan earlier today. So just really, really good partners, really good sponsors. And I think the sponsors that, that represented this event just had a ton of scale on the marketplace. So it was kind of interesting to see that. But from a media mix modeling standpoint, ultimately, what we're seeing is that addressability works, right? Whether that be addressable TV or CTV. I know Adam yesterday quoted a number about a 5x more efficiency when you look at a CTV versus a linear TV. We are within our media mix modeling seeing about a 5 times return as well when you look at addressable against something like spot TV. So it's definitely proving out. It's something that is worthwhile from our standpoint. Obviously, we're here doing this today. But overall, media mix modeling it's a beast. It requires a ton of data, a ton of really clean data, well-structured data. And, it's something that we've been building for a few years. I don't know where other autos are at in the journey. But it's more of a top level insight, right? Use it for planning purposes. You're not going to get into which partner should you run with, how do you optimize your media at a tactical level. It's more about those broad sweeping, hey, what's my channel mix and where should we be? So with adding in addressable TV, CTV, we're definitely seeing that it over indexes at contribution to sale.
And when you talk about that, I mean, you're basically, this is what Melissa was talking about in terms of that audience first approach. So can you kind of walk us through that and how you got started with that?
Yeah. So Melissa yesterday hit on this number of 19x more likely, right? 19x more likely to buy a Cadillac. And, we started with the adult population, right? 242 million folks in the US. And whether that be with a company like Merkle, a company like Conversant, Infobase, right? Those are kind of the big players in data on everybody. They're kind of the digital phone book of the new world. Right, then we can get into demographic targeting. And I know Melissa mentioned yesterday, we're not really using demos too much, and I'll kind of share a little bit more on that on the upcoming slides. But then we whittled this down to a high propensity Cadillac audience, right, a subset of this population. And it was, built off of a seed list based off our owners, which I'll actually switch slides here to kind of talk about our journey, talk about the high level process that got us to this propensity modeling. Right, and it really started with our own data set. Right, all of the OEMs here have first party data. Right, we all know who our buyers are, so we used that and we sent it off to our data partnership, and we started modeling those people and really trying to understand who they are, what's unique about them, why are they specific to Cadillac versus maybe an other Lux buyer or other Lux OEM owner. And then we matched them, right? We went into this M1 database and we said, hey, we know who those people are. This is an addressable marketplace, and there's a footprint of these people. We then output that audience into whether it be a publisher addressable marketplace, right? Our ATV and CTV partners, and the audience is matched at 1-to-1, and we're really able to do this targeting. So kind of a high level view, right? That's very complicated modeling, but this is kind of the journey we took. And we started off and built, a brand model, and then we expanded to individual nameplates. We have some for future vehicles. We even get into some regional looks as well.
And now for that, I mean, it seems like there's a lot more effort going involved. Cost-wise, how is it more efficient? Is it more expensive? What are we seeing there?
So I think, definitely there's an investment in data, whether you're buying lists from Experian or Polk, or you're doing something like Cadillac, where you're going out and investing in, large data sets and custom modeling. So, it takes a commitment, but, from what we've seen, one, it's measurable, right? You can pay it off through the sale. So which is definitely, something that we haven't been able to do with TV. And I think, before we talk about kind of some of the things that we're seeing from there, I did want to, sorry, and I can build this out here. Oh, there we go. Kind of expand on the variables. And I know Melissa mentioned that it's not about demographics. This is a view, we've talked about these 1,000 variables, and, they're not demographic based, right? They're finance based, they're lifestyle based, they're home and real estate based, they're auto. But yeah, a little bit of demographics, geographics. I think one of my favorite traits that we saw pop was, right, people like cruising, right, on cruise ships. And it's like, now I look at that and I'm like, yeah, they used to like to go on a cruise ship. Yeah. So I'm sorry to kind of skip back a beat there. But from a, measurement standpoint, from, is this stuff working? It definitely is. The measurement side of it's important. I think, activating, having a roadmap to activate and expand upon partners, right? We started off with one addressable partner. We've scaled up to basically all of them, right? I mean, each addressable partner has different geographic coverage, maybe outside of Dish. So there's definitely a roadmap and a journey that you can take to get there.
And well, determining even those partners, I mean, obviously that's an undertaking. And how do you know who's the right fit and who's going to give you that data that you need? I mean, that's all of that. It's involved, and that must not be something you just do overnight.
Yeah, no, it took us, I mean, probably a better part of a year to kind of get to where we're at today. We identified one partner out of the gate that seemed to be a good fit for us. They seemed to offer some good flexibility. They were, willing and able to ingest our audiences. But then, all the ATV providers now have that capability. And, if your goal is reach, one partner within the ATV space won't give you the reach you need, right? Cable companies are generally geographic. I think on the flip side of that, CTV, right? It's, the landscape's flooded with partners, and, frequency control is really, really important. And I know Roku kind of touched on that as well. But, I think in ATV, more is more, and in CTV, less is more, because you're trying to do different things and really control for frequency there. And you don't need to activate 20 different partners to get your reach, because there are some big players in the space that, as long as you strategically figure out the right pecking order to activate those partners, you can get good reach and eliminate some of that overlap that was talked about earlier too.
Well, and you talk about that even maybe as an example during COVID, but obviously there's going to be times when this is needed, where there are certain dealerships that might have been closed because of the situation. And so one national advertisement would be a waste of money. So ultimately, I mean, it sounds like when we were talking before, it is more expensive a little bit, but it becomes more efficient in that sense. So is it
For sure.
Actually much more cost effective?
Yeah, I think, and this was touched on a little bit earlier by a couple of folks too. I mean, the idea of getting the right message into the market at the right time is something that, using your audiences for is perfect. we have this, it's a marketing cube. We actually call it the Grady marketing cube because, Melissa helped design it. But it really is about making sure we understand when people are in market, what's the right message to serve them based off, are they 5 years out or 1 year out or 6 months out? And then, yeah, different geographic considerations. Definitely during COVID, I know Melissa touched on this. We were sending different messages into market based off open and closed dealerships, where they're at with the buying process, and the comfort level there of even going into a dealership, inventory levels. And if you think, right now the auto industry is getting hit with the semiconductor issues, that's going to probably cause different geographic inventory constraints based off what models are impacted. It's going to cause just a whole host of issues. Different models will be available versus other models. So if you have, smart data, individual, CT4, CT5 level models, you can activate those where you want, when you want. So that, there's efficiency and flexibility.
Well, and talk about, so obviously data is key here. And
Yeah.
Are you providing the data for the most part, or is your partner, or is it a collaboration? Like anyone who's interested in pursuing this, what do they need to know up front?
Yeah, so everybody's kind of probably at a different spot in the journey, and there's definitely a couple different ways to go about it. But ultimately, we control our data. This is, it's why we kind of ventured into building our own models and making sure that we have complete control over our data. One, it allows you to do your own measurement, which is huge. We hold our own control groups out before we send our data anywhere. So it really allows us to get a good sense of measurement. And, I'm not saying that measurement from any of our vendors is not valuable. I mean, there's some really, really brilliant stuff. I've actually reviewed the work from Adam at Samsung, and it's fantastic. So that's one thing. I think, yeah, I don't know. Drawn a blank. I think I kind of lost the question. If you could repeat it to me, actually. I was on a roll and.
Well, in terms of data, but you actually even just touched on measurement. How are you, what are you seeing now since you've been doing this high propensity model? What are you seeing numbers wise? What's your mix look like?
Yeah, so mix has definitely changed. And actually, let me flip to that slide real quick. I think Dan hit on this a little bit too, but there's always going to be a place for linear TV, right? It's huge, it's scale, but we really did flip the funnel in terms of the way that we go to market. And we started off and normally we buy, right? Let's start with our big TV buy, and then let's fill in with other, more maybe targeted tactics. We really took that and flipped it and said, hey, let's start with our addressable buys, right? Let's really go after these people we know. Let's maximize that dollar. Let's make sure we have the right frequency against those folks. And we started working our way up the funnel, right? To ultimately get to, okay, these high profile sponsorships, sporting events, tentpole events. Melissa talked about James Blake yesterday, and we can even bounce James Blake's music up against our M1 audience and our model to say, how does his music index against our buyers, right? Is he a good partner from that standpoint? And then there's obviously the art of it, right? I mean, we're talking a lot about data, but there is the art to the beauty of the creative and the right message in the right place.
And when you get into the creative, where does that come into play? Process.
So we start everything with an audience view, right? Whether it be a media partner, when we brief our creative agencies, it's all about, this is who the target is. This is what makes them unique. These are the attributes and the lifestyles that they live. And that really leads the creative briefing process. I think, before this kind of audience first approach, creative led the strategy, and now you're looking at it saying, hey, data or audience is leading the strategy. So it's changed the dynamic and the order of how we go to market and how we develop and brief our agencies. So it's much more audience led out of the gate.
Well, when you're talking so many different dealerships, so many different markets, and so many different people, different,
Yeah,
I mean, I know there's a typical audience for Cadillac, but
right.
I'm assuming in different areas that can alter. How does that then affect creative and then the costs again?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a line of, a fine line between too much, right? The idea of personalization and customization for the sake of it is one thing, but finding the right cohorts and building the right groups and keeping it manageable is definitely something that needs to be thought about. We do a lot of personalization, whether it be on our .coms or within our media buys and within our creative development. And I think we're still figuring that out. It's one thing to say, keep it simple, but there's definitely that balance of how much is too much, and we're still figuring it out. We have a lot to learn, and I think it also depends, back to what your goals are, right? If your goal is to move sheet metal, your creative's going to do one thing. If your goal is to move brand funnel metrics and upper funnel measures and brand health, the creative needs to be something totally different. And the activation needs to be different.
Well, I have one more question, but I want to remind everyone that we want to give you guys time to ask questions of Eric. So if you have any, raise your hand and Tanya will send you an unmute, and then you can ask whatever you'd like to ask Eric and confuse him even more. But Eric, I mean, all of this, obviously, as you said, you sort of had a head start, and then
Yeah,
with COVID, it really accelerated things.
it
And
did.
now we're moving, hopefully there's more of a light that we're coming out of. So moving forward, I mean, even just for any advice you'd give people just starting out or what you're doing, what are the key things that you need for a strategy like this to make it successful? And what do you see yourself moving forward with?
Yeah. Obviously it takes a commitment. And whether you decide to do a small investment and test into audiences from Polk or Experian, or kind of go all into the modeling approach, it's definitely something that takes commitment. I think we've pre-built roadmaps and learning agendas to make sure that we knew exactly what we wanted to test and learn when. And obviously COVID changed part of that and created a whole new opportunity, and being able to pivot and to kind of look at that, it again created additional opportunity. But I think having the roadmap, the dedication to it, selecting the right partners out of the gate makes a big difference. Again, I think we've learned over time that there's, within the CTV space, you only need a handful, right? On the ATV side, you need more. So trying to just figure out what's the right mix. How do you control for frequency? How do you make sure that what you're putting out in one channel is consistent with what you're putting out in another channel? And again, that's the beauty of one-to-one, is you can do omni-channel activation with a consistent message, whether that be in digital or TV or on your .coms property as well.
Got it. So Tanya, hey, so any questions for Eric?
Yeah, I actually have a question, and it's
Hey,
not
Tanya.
original. I can't take responsibility for it, but somebody asked Melissa yesterday, how are you guys reaching boomers? Because
Yeah.
I think there's this perception that like the latest advertising is very young, the Jonas Brothers and what have you. And Melissa's answer was, well, we're not really looking at demographics. We're looking more at and it's more, I guess, is the word still psychographic? Is that what you look at? And is that more difficult actually than just demographics?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if it's more difficult, because it's all what's behind the data and the intelligence in the model. So basically what we're doing is going after trait-based modeling, right? There's always a place for behavioral data in the market, right? The idea of, advertising on an endemic site where, there's people shopping, right? Google audiences are all based off people doing real-time behaviors. That pool's finite though. And this pool is not, right? It allows you to expand. So I don't think it's more difficult. It's just it's a mindset change. We're so used to saying, hey, let's go after people doing these shopping activities for cars. Well, not everybody does digital shopping activities. Not everybody is out researching, right? Some people shop on tier 1, some people shop on tier 3. So this really allows us to change that and find in-market shoppers anywhere, right? We don't have to go to the endemics. You know, granted, they have a place, they have a purpose, and, you know, again, really, really good partners. But, you know, we activated 7 new digital partners last year to find buyers, and none of them were endemics. So it's just expands your opportunities.
Well, sort of related to that, Steven Sturm has a question, and he wants to know how do you work with tier 2 dealer groups?
So right now, we obviously do a coordinated approach, you know, from tier 1 to all the way down to tier 3. It's definitely a little bit more of just a manual coordination and talking about, hey, how do we get this stuff to align? I think we have some bigger goals in the future with Addressable. I mean, I know Dish hit on this, but there is the opportunity to look at regional or local level buys, whether that be at a national level, right? That helps you get those really, really good local level offers in the market. But ultimately, it's just how far can you distribute your data, and do your tier 2 partners have the capability to activate, right? Do they have that skill set? Do they have the right partners, the media partners? And then obviously making sure that if you activate your audience at tier 1, 2, and 3, then you really have to think about frequency. So it's something that we're looking at. It's definitely I think a bigger beast to solve for.
Great.
And actually, before I do let you go, you talked a lot about you guys control your data.
Yeah.
And for those who maybe don't have the resources of Cadillac, are there partners out there that they can look to and say, you know, let me get the data from you? Or is it more of a combination? How does that work best for anyone like that?
No, you know, there's definitely good, awesome data partners out there, right? I mean, Polk data is fantastic. Experian data is great. There's also a handful of companies that, you know, take the data from these larger companies, right, like the Merkles and the Conversants of the world, and build their own data intelligence behind those data sets. So there's definitely, I think, companies out there. You know, I'm not going to recommend one over the other, but there's a handful of really, really good, smart, you know, data modeling companies that can make sense of a lot of this stuff.
It just doesn't exclude someone who doesn't necessarily have their own, you know, their own resource that way.
Yeah.
Another brand that might be a little bit, you know, just getting started.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we made a commitment to this a few years ago, and you know, we're finally starting to see kind of the benefits from it.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. I'm really glad we were trying to do it for the last one, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about it this time, because I, as you said, it's been the subject for a lot of people bringing it up both yesterday and today. So it's on people's minds.
Cool. Yeah. Any questions, feel free to reach out, and thanks.
Thanks,
Happy to be here. Yeah.